Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the 20th day of Provision 2020 webinar series. Provision is an online portal webinar series hosted by Father Mullah Homeopathic Medical College, Mangalore. It is a platform provided for homeopathic practitioners and students all over India to enhance their knowledge by listening to the stalwarts of homeopathy. It's my privilege to welcome our administrator, Reverend Father Roshan Krasta, Principal Dr. Shivprasad K, Vice Principal ESJ Prabhukiran for this session today. I also welcome the speaker for today's session, Dr. Angelica D'Souza, who is here to speak on the topic COVID-19, the homeopathic response. I welcome the moderator for today's session, Dr. Sheena Salin, Professor, Department of Pathology. I request the moderator to take over the session. Over to you, ma'am.
A very good evening to one and all present to witness the 20th day of the webinar series Provision 2020 organized by Father Mullah Homeopathic Medical College, Mangalore. It's my proud privilege to introduce the resource person of the day, our alumnus, Dr. Angelica D'Souza. Dr. Angelica D'Souza completed her BHMS from Father Mullah Homeopathic Medical College, Mangalore in 2008. A multi-talented personality, she was awarded the best outgoing student of the batch. A consultant homeopath in Mumbai, she practices in 2 prime locations in the city since then. Through her 12 years of clinical experience practicing classical homeopathy, she has also contributed towards various causes for women and children's health and others on different platforms. She is also an active contributor in medical and homeopathic journals. During the current pandemic, she has had the opportunity to treat COVID cases, both positive and suspect, very successfully with homeopathy. Rapid spread of this severe acute respiratory syndrome, a potentially fatal disease, is of great global public health concern presently. This evening, Dr. Angelica is here to share her experiences on the homeopathic response to this great challenge faced by the medical fraternity. With this introduction, I request Dr. Angelica to take over the session. Over to you, Dr. Angelica.
Thank you very much, Dr. Sheena. It was so lovely to hear your voice after so many years. And when I came to know that you are the moderator of my session, I told my husband that this was one of my most loved yet most feared teachers. So it is an honor that you are the moderator for my session.
Thank you so much.
Also, I thank Dr. Shivprasad and all the teaching faculty for the very fact that I am here today, for the fact that I am a homeopathic doctor. I will ever be grateful to this institution. And thank you especially for this opportunity to be able to share some of my experiences with each of you. So I'd like to begin. All right, so we all know this has been one of the biggest scares all right, so we all know this has been one of the biggest. A lot of people in Mumbai have now almost gotten used to the pandemic situation. We have been in lockdown since now more than 4 months. We're completing nearly 5 months in lockdown. And in the last 5 months, life has been chaotic to say the least. We struggle because in the city of Mumbai, we do not have open spaces. We live in closed apartments. And so the lockdown has been a real challenge here. With our children not being able to even go out into playgrounds and being in these closed spaces. So in fact, I suppose after the pandemic is over, we will have a lot more to deal with post-pandemic situation or post-COVID situation as far as mental stress and trauma is concerned, and frustrations building just by being sitting inside the home. But I believe there will be another chance for us to deal with those. So currently we are discussing about how to deal with this pandemic. I have put the topic as COVID-19, the homeopathic response. Okay, so what do we have at hand? What is the task that we have at hand primarily? So we have 3 things basically. The first one is prophylaxis, that is prevention and what you can do to avoid getting the COVID infection. The second one is the treatment of the acute cases. Now, when I say acute cases, I want to include both COVID-19 suspect cases and COVID-19 positive cases. Why do I say COVID-19 suspect and positive? Is because in the initial phase of the pandemic setting into the city here, there was not much testing readily available. There was a lot of strict protocol to follow in order to have testing done, so it was not so readily available. So that is why a lot of patients would not even want to get tested in the beginning. And so we were just treating them symptomatically. So I would put them all under COVID suspect cases because they all had the complete presentation of COVID in a way. And then also there were those who were tested positive, and then the family members begin to start showing symptoms when they live in the same home. So they have not been tested positive, but you know that it is COVID because it has passed through the COVID positive individual. So that becomes a COVID suspect case. And then the next task at hand is the post-COVID complications. Now here there are some immediate complications and some long-lasting ones, some that resolve within a week or two and some that last longer. So let's begin with talking about the prophylaxis. I think in the first session that we have had in the ProVision series, there was a session already on COVID, and I think a lot of talk on the prophylaxis was already dealt with, but we'll still talk about prophylaxis. So the Ayush Ministry has given us arsenic alb 30 to be used as a prophylactic medicine, and a lot of people in the country have already been using it. The question we need to ask ourselves before giving anybody arsenic alb 30 is, what do we say when we give them arsenic alb 30? Here in Mumbai, a lot of people began to say that it is an immunity booster. So there was a lot of talk that COVID-19 is affecting people with low immunity. So everybody suddenly became very, very urgently in need of immunity. And so this arsenic alb 30 started getting distributed in the name of immunity booster. Now, as doctors, all of you know that you cannot really boost someone's immunity in 3 days, right? So the Ayush Ministry suggested that we take arsenic alb 30 for 3 days in the morning, for a period of 3 days, and then repeat it after a month. But in 3 days, you cannot really boost your immune system, especially one that has been jeopardized and not taken care of for periods of time, for long periods of time, for years together. People who have had an unhealthy lifestyle over the period of time, eating a lot of junk food, not having healthy sleeping habits, and not doing any kind of healthy exercise, or having lifestyle disorders already. All these people cannot just regain their immunity with 3 doses of arsenic alb 30. So that is why arsenic alb 30 cannot be distributed as an immunity booster. But as far as a prophylaxis was concerned, this was definitely a good prophylactic medicine. Now, this medicine has been distributed really, really largely in almost every part of the country. I know that people have been speaking about arsenic alb. Here in the city of Mumbai, we have had the local health authorities distributing arsenic alb happily because it was probably available readily. And the local health authorities distributed it to the police personnel because they were the frontline people. A lot of frontline workers were given arsenic alb. Unfortunately, in this large distribution of arsenic alb, nobody really kept a tab, or a documentation did not happen as far as who was being given and whether the people who took arsenic alb were COVID free or not. Now, I personally distributed arsenic alb 30 to a large number of people. Initially, I started keeping tab and tried to keep a watch on whether these people test positive or not. But the numbers were simply huge. Everybody was crowding for this medicine, and so I couldn't continue single-handedly to keep a tab. But I wish that in the system of Ayush, there was some kind of system in place where there was a way to keep a tab on whether it was helping or not. Personally, I know a lot of people who took arsenic alb 30 and still got the infection and tested positive. So it has not been 100% preventive, so to say. In a way, also, it so happens that people who take preventive medicine, they just assume that they can stop taking the necessary precautions, and then they go around like as if nothing has happened, and then they contract the illness. So it's something that we need to sound our people when we give them something like a prophylactic medicine, saying that just because you take this medicine doesn't make you immune completely. You have to also take the necessary precautions and social distancing and all these other things that the government has been telling us about. In the beginning, we were giving arsenicate 30, but over a period of time, we switched to 200 because 30 potency didn't seem to be enough. We moved to 200 and we also repeated it a little more frequently. I started giving patients twice a day over a period of 3 days. Now, arsenicate 200 is arguably the genus epidemicus. Why do I say arguably? Because a lot of doctors do not believe that it is the genus epidemicus. But in a way, the beginning of the beginning phase of COVID, the presentation of symptoms was very typical arsenic alb symptoms. And therefore, I believe that in the beginning, at least, arsenic alb was definitely helping people and was definitely making them slightly ready for the virus. So those who took it, even those who got the virus, were probably a little bit milder compared to the ones who had not taken arsenic alb. Now, what I found to be more effective in prophylaxis was the medicine tuberculinum bovinum. Now, this, I believe, had done a good deal in raising the chest immunity, the respiratory system immunity in all my patients. So the patients who are already coming to me for their regular treatment, I gave all of them tuberculinum. And none of the ones whom I gave tuberculinum tested positive. Now, these patients I have kept a track of because these were not large numbers. So I knew whom I had given tuberculinum, and most of the ones who received tuberculinum, 99% of them did not test positive after tuberculinum. So I found this to be more effective. I will talk more about it a little later when we talk about the post-COVID treatment. What do you do after the person recovers from COVID? Apart from arsenicate 30 or 200 and tuberculinum, really speaking, I found the best immune booster medicine, so to say, or the best prophylaxis medicine was the constitutional remedy of the individual. If this patient has been coming to you regularly for treatment and you have already found this patient's constitutional remedy, constitutional totality, then it is the best remedy to prevent not just COVID, for that matter, any other viral or bacterial infection. So I would say that the ideal way to provide immunity is by giving constitutional remedies. Single dose in higher potency did the deal, and those who got their constitutional medicine so far have been good. So I believe that as far as prophylaxis is concerned, you must give them constitutional remedy. All right. So let's move to the next task. Prophylaxis is the first task. The second one is the treatment. Now, we had 4 sets of cases. The first one is asymptomatic cases. Second one was the mild cases. Then we had moderate cases, and then we had severe cases. Now, we will talk about the asymptomatic cases. Now, asymptomatic cases are constituting nearly 58% of the population of people who test COVID positive. Mind you, these are all COVID positive. They have been tested positive, but 58% of those who are tested positive remain asymptomatic. Now, if they have been tested and we know it's asymptomatic, we can still help them to remain isolated or advise them to remain quarantined so that it doesn't spread. But unfortunately, those who are asymptomatic do not even get tested. So these are the ones who are the dangerous people moving around us. Because you are asymptomatic, you tend to walk around, not worrying about whether you're passing on the infection to others or not. But you have to start treating yourselves, whether asymptomatic or not, whether positive or not, start treating yourselves as a COVID patient so that you continue to take the necessary precautions and distance yourself from others so that you do not infect others. So the asymptomatic cases, the allopathic protocol was very simple. You had to ask the patient to do a CBC, do an RFT, do an RBS, do an LFT, and do an ECG for the sake of knowing where you stand at the beginning of the disease. Isolation wards or isolation at home was the solution given to them, and they were asked to do daily monitoring of temperature and their oxygen saturation. Now, the homeopathic approach was all of the above. You had to do the same thing. You had to do your investigations. A lot of asymptomatic cases refused to do investigations, which was still okay. But daily monitoring of temperature and oxygen saturation became very important even in the asymptomatic cases. So the prophylactic approach, again, what I did was in most of my patients who came without symptoms, I gave them tuberculinum again in their single dose. If they were known patients, then the best approach was to give them also a single dose of constitutional remedy in higher potency, and that was all they needed. So most of them did not develop any symptoms after that. So those who begin being asymptomatic very rarely also develop into symptomatic cases. They mostly remain at that stage, 15 days of isolation, quarantine at home, and they are good to go after that. So a lot of people initially had it mandatory that you also test negative in order to be able to start moving out and doing your things as normal. But over a period of time, it became very difficult because the number of cases started increasing. So the doctors were not any longer waiting for them to test negative, because in some cases, they became asymptomatic in the ones who had symptoms, became asymptomatic in 10 days to 15 days. And the viral load was very, very low, and it was not enough to pass on the infection to others. But still, sometimes after 3 to 4 weeks of onset of symptoms, also the test continued to remain positive. So they stopped doing a test to get negative. Initially, they wouldn't even discharge from the hospital till you get a negative result. I can see a question popping up already, so I'll deal with that. There are a lot of false negative reports that happened. So each one who got a negative report but still had COVID symptoms or had pneumonia or had low oxygen saturation was still treated as COVID positive. We couldn't have a false negative person walking around if they had symptoms. But a false positive case is something that you really can't help. If you have a false positive, you just probably, if you think very sure that it is a false positive report, then you just need to repeat the test after a few days to ensure it is not genuinely positive or it's negative. All right. So moving on to the mild cases, what were the symptoms that they presented with? Most often it was upper respiratory tract infection symptoms. You had throat pains, throat irritations, coryza, sneezing, cough. Some of them came with fever. There was anosmia, which is loss of smell, loss of taste, diarrhea, malaise, headache, backache, and body ache accompanied practically all of them. Now here again, I'd like to mention that the fever is usually low grade. Okay, so if you have somebody coming with 102, 103 fever, then it is most likely not going to be COVID, because COVID fevers have all been in the range of 99 degrees to 101 maximum. The ones that went beyond was 102, 103 were all tested for positive for typhoid or malaria, but were tested negative for COVID most of the time. Of course, that doesn't completely rule out, but if it is a high grade fever, then there are very less chances that it is COVID positive, because COVID cases all came with low grade fever. Anosmia and loss of taste, I will talk about a little later. A lot of patients came with diarrhea. In the beginning, the diarrhea was an associated symptom along with upper respiratory tract symptoms. But over a period of time, the presentation of symptoms gradually kept changing, and people started only having diarrhea as a presenting symptom. Now, when somebody comes to you with diarrhea, you don't immediately want to think they're COVID positive. But in the month of May and the month of the beginning of June, there were so many patients who presented only with diarrhea. They had no fever, no upper respiratory tract symptoms, no other symptoms, but just diarrhea. And those cases also had to be immediately sent for testing, and most of them turned out COVID positive also. All right. Malaise, headache, backache, and body ache was along with almost every patient had these symptoms. Now, in the beginning, I found in the month of April, when the pandemic began to take action in the city, I found that a lot of cases were coming with similar symptoms of COVID, but we could not really test them because the testing protocol was very, very aggressive and very strict in the beginning. You couldn't really send anybody for testing unless you had really solid reasons. And initially, the doctors had to sign and stamp a pro forma stating that you have tested and you have checked and examined the patient, and that is why you find that he or she needs a COVID test. Now, in the beginning, when this just began to happen, COVID was being treated almost like, not being treated, but people almost treated COVID like it was leprosy. You know, it was a huge stigma in the minds of the people if they tested positive. Now, what happened here is as soon as someone tested positive, the local authorities, that is the BMC health authorities, would come and seal their home, seal the floor on which they live in the apartment, initially they used to seal the entire apartment. And what happened was they got literally ostracized by the rest of society. The rest of the people living in the building started treating them like untouchables, started treating them like they had, some really severe disease. It was true, COVID was contagious, it was spreading so fast, so people stayed away from them. But in the mind, it became too humiliating and too difficult for people to take just being tested positive. So in the initial phases, people just refused to do the test. So when we found COVID symptoms coming up in a patient and I ordered a COVID test, the patient would just cut off and stop getting in touch with me after. So I've had a couple of patients in the month of April who approached me with COVID symptoms. I asked them to do a COVID test and they just did not get back to me because they just did not want to do the test. So initially accepting this COVID situation was also difficult. It was a stigma, so people were not willing to do it. A lot of people came with symptoms that began after they only merely heard about somebody else testing positive. Ailments from bad news. In all those patients, Gelsemium 200 single dose did a wonderful job. They were just so panicky and paranoid simply when they came to know that somebody else tested positive. Gelsemium 200 did a fantastic job. In most of the mild cases, arsenic iode, Gelsemium, Bryonia, Ferrumphos, Talibike, Pulse, Rustox, these were all the go-to remedies. They did an excellent job and took care of the infection in the first 2 days of the presenting symptoms. All right. This COVID diarrhea, again, as I said, most of them did well with aloe, Nux vomica, Bryonia, and Pulsatilla. Some cases presented with diarrhea which mimicked typhoid symptoms, but the differentiating factor, as I told you earlier, was that the presenting fever was mostly low grade. Weakness is a very, very highly marked COVID symptom. The weakness is really extreme and it's one of the most long-lasting symptoms. It is the last to go. At least after 20 days of the initial onset of symptoms, the people were still complaining of severe weakness. So that was something that had to be dealt with just nutrition and hydration. A word on anosmia and loss of taste. Anosmia is loss of smell and loss of taste. Initially, this symptom was not even known to be a COVID symptom. So the thing about COVID is that it is a novel coronavirus. So there is no real textbook to go to learn something about how to treat coronavirus. You don't really have, previous doctors in the past who have treated. So you could, go back to take some reference, some help from, the past. But this was something new. And so initially, there was not even anything written available for doctors to follow, like a protocol, or to know that these are the symptoms. The initial Ayush documentation did not even feature this symptom of loss of smell and loss of taste, did not even feature in that document. So I wanted to mention this particularly because in the beginning of this phase of the pandemic in the city here, a lot of people came to me with sudden loss of smell and loss of taste. And I assumed it is probably because of sometimes after coryza or after an upper respiratory tract infection, you tend to have loss of smell and taste after a fever, and assume that it will pass off. And I just gave them some, post coryza symptoms, some very, very. But what began to get me thinking was within a week, I had nearly 8 cases of patients who came to me with only loss of smell and loss of taste. They came to me and said, "Doctor, अचानक 3 दिन से बंद हो गया नाक, या अचानक 3 दिन से खाने का taste नहीं आता." I mean, suddenly in 3 days, I don't get taste and I cannot smell anything. And if I tried to find out if they had any upper respiratory infections prior to that or any fever, some of them even said nothing at all. It was only at this point that I got curious and I started looking for some medical paper written about it, and I then found out that it was a COVID symptom. It was very, very clearly written that in Italy, practically a lot of cases had already come up with only loss of smell and taste. So then I realized that these are also COVID positive cases and I need to take the necessary precautions as a clinician, and I cannot have somebody with a loss of taste and loss of smell coming into my clinic just like that without my protection on. So in some cases, it was merely a mild complication. Some of them, in some cases, it settled after a while. But some cases, patients got really panicky because when they came to know that it's a COVID symptom, they were really upset. They thought it might remain forever and they would have to live through their life with this loss of smell and taste. So in these cases, if they really insisted on medicine, then I would give them placebo. But if it was really severe, then Zincum Phos and Zincum Met worked very effectively. All right. So coming to the moderately symptomatic cases, the moderate cases were the ones that we had to really be careful about, because here's where pneumonia began to develop in the patients. So along with all the symptoms that I mentioned earlier from the mild cases, in addition to that, people came up with cough, dyspnea, oxygen saturations dropping to 90 to 94%, chest pain, along with all the other upper respiratory tract infection symptoms. Pneumonia was diagnosed by chest x-rays, and in worst cases, especially the ones which were not very clear with x-rays, we had to do an HRCT. All right. A word on checking oxygen saturation. A pulse oximeter is something that I know a lot of homeopaths do not even know about. I'm talking to probably, I know I don't have to tell this to senior doctors, but a lot of junior doctors do not even know what a pulse oximeter is, whether you need to keep one in the clinic or not. So even before the pandemic set in, I've had a pulse oximeter in the clinic, but with my patients' oxygen saturations dropping, I couldn't give my pulse oximeter to all the patients because of the infection levels, the contagion traveling through the oximeter machine itself. So then I had to start telling patients to start buying their own oximeter if they wanted to regulate their oxygen saturation at home, if they wanted to monitor oxygen saturation at home. If you do not have a machine at home and you already have COVID symptoms, then they would take you to a quarantine facility or to a hospital and get admitted because your oxygen saturations needed to be monitored. This is one thing that patients were not able to come to terms with. When you told them that your oxygen may drop, or if I told them that you have to buy a pulse oximeter, they were very upset. They used to say, don't treat me like I'm going to die, because nothing is going to happen to me. So unfortunately, it was very difficult to get them or educate them to tell them you need to check your oxygen saturation, because there is something called as happy hypoxia. I do not know how many of you know about this term called happy hypoxia. So when you ask a patient, are you experiencing breathlessness? They may say no, but even if they are not really experiencing breathlessness, the oxygen saturation could have already dropped up to 80%. And below that, if it has to go, then the patient is going to immediately need oxygen support in a hospital environment. But patients do not even experience breathlessness, even though they are in a hypoxic state. This is what you call happy hypoxia. So you cannot merely go by what the patients say or what the patients are experiencing when you ask them if they're feeling breathless or not. So if you have a COVID positive patient, then the first thing you need to do is tell them to find an oximeter and keep one at home with them. And then you have to check and monitor their oxygen saturation every 4 to 6 hours in worst cases, or every 24 hours in the mild cases. Now, the ideal oxygen saturation, you all know, should be 98 to 99%. Up to 90% is still dealable at home. As soon as it starts beginning to drop below 90, it needs to be monitored more frequently. And once it was touching 85 or 80, the patient needed to be hospitalized immediately. In this COVID situation, my dear friends, as homeopaths, we do not have, at least because of being private practitioners, you do not really have the opportunity to treat them under your care in a hospital facility. That is why here in this situation, it became very, very essential to know exactly at what point your patient needs to get admitted. Here, it was not just about, making sure it is just homeopathy doing the work. It was only homeopathy treating the patient. It was more important to know exactly at which point you're going to need external support with hospital equipment. So it was very dicey in some cases. I had to make myself available to patients 24/7. I had a couple of COVID patients who had pneumonia, who had cough and were experiencing dyspnea, and I had to give them oximeters. And there were some patients whose oxygen saturation was dropping at 2 a.m., fever rising at 4 a.m., and I had to just make myself available. So those weeks rather of day and night monitoring of a couple of patients made me lose a lot of sleep. And I think I had a very supportive family who were willing to eat simple food those days, because I couldn't cook and give my children anything special. But I believe that was the role that I had to play as a doctor. But yes, those were the difficult days, because the peak was extreme in the month of May, June, and the beginning of July. All right, so that was about oxygen saturation. Chest pain and exertional dyspnea are signs of pneumonia already beginning, and in those cases an X-ray became mandatory. All right. The absence of fever. Should you get happy once your patient has no fever? So a lot of cases, once the onset of symptoms began, right from day 1 to let's say day 7 or day 8, some people had fever. But in most COVID cases, whether you gave them homeopathy or you made them have paracetamol and dolo, within 4 days, 3 to 4 days, fever would subside. But just because fever subsided, so I know a lot of people who self-medicated during this time because they were afraid to get themselves tested. A lot of people who started having fever just started popping in paracetamols and dolo and taking it twice a day or thrice a day over a period of 3-4 days. And then the fever went away because the COVID fevers stop by the 4th day. In 4 days, the fever goes away, but that doesn't mean you are COVID negative. That doesn't mean you are cured of COVID, because it is only after that that the complications begin to rise. Oxygen saturation begins to drop only after the 5th day of the onset of symptoms. So it was very important to ask the patient to continue to monitor his or her temperature and oxygen saturation even after the symptom of fever disappeared. Now, with homeopathic medicine, when homeopathic medicine was given in almost all my COVID cases where there was fever, in 24 hours, the fever dropped to normal. So that is where you know you are on the right track. If your fever is going after 4 days, then probably that is something to worry about, because fever in 4 days is going anyway, whether you give homeopathic remedy or not. But if you want to know that your totality and your remedy is correct, then the fever must subside in 24 hours. Then you know you are on the right track. All right. Okay, so the lab investigations that involved at this moderate stage were CBC, ESR, RBS, LFT, and RFT. These are all the mild cases were asked to do these investigations. Along with that, we had to ask our patients to do CRP, which is C-reactive proteins, serum ferritin, LDH, which is lactose dehydrogenase, D-dimer, interleukin-6, chest X-ray, and HRCT. Now, a lot of these investigations probably was something that we were not used to doing earlier. These were all, at least to me, I had to, get acquainted with these investigations before I started prescribing them to my patients. CRP, C-reactive proteins, you all know, is elevated when you have any kind of inflammation in the body. But that was one of the most beautiful indicators to know the prognosis of your patient, the CRP. Serum ferritin, I should say, ferritin is basically an iron storage protein. All right. So as you know, the ferritin helps you make the iron more soluble in the blood. So in the soluble form, the body is able to expend iron as required. Now, in the case of pneumonia and in the case of dropping oxygen saturation, the body required to oxygenate the blood even more. So there was more effort needed for oxygenation. That is where ferritin came into play. This serum ferritin started increasing the oxygenation capacity at the cellular level, and therefore there was a raise in serum ferritin seen in all COVID patients. Now, ideally, it should be 1 to 150, but in the COVID patients, it started rising up to 400 and 500 plus. When serum ferritin was at that level, we know that we are in danger zone and the patient might go into what we call cytokine storm. I'll talk a little bit about cytokine storm a little later. Now, lactose dehydrogenase, that is also an intracellular enzyme. It is found in almost all the organ systems, but this LDH we know is present in lung tissue as well. Now, patients with severe COVID-19 infections can be expected to release greater amounts of this LDH in the circulation because of the interstitial pneumonia that is present accompanying it. It involves into acute respiratory distress syndrome, and that is why this became a hallmark biomarker of this disease. So when LDH levels were raised, we knew that the patient is going to go into an cytokine storm. All right. D-dimer. So if you see D-dimer levels rising, that means you know your patient is going to go into coagulation, disseminated intravascular coagulation, which is one of the complications of COVID-19. Interleukin-6, this is what you call a cytokine. What are cytokines? I'm not sure at what level. So cytokines basically are protein secretions, which are supposed to be your messenger cells between your immune cells. So they are supposed to send messages from one immune cell to the other. So particularly interleukin-6 is supposed to be the messenger cell between two leukocytes. Now leukocytes are your immune system cells. They are your defense mechanism. Now initially, when you contract the virus, the interleukin-6 comes into play, cytokines are released. Basically, that is your body's immune response. But over a period of time, the cytokine production goes into an overdrive. It goes into an overdrive, and these immune cells start forgetting or start being unable to recognize the difference between its own self, that is its own cells, and the cells of the enemy virus. And then it starts beginning to start eating up itself, killing itself. That is where we are in danger zone. The body's own immune system becomes our enemy. Our body's own immune system becomes our enemy. Now here at this point, at the cytokine storm point, it becomes very dicey to treat homeopathically, because it is, you are trying to raise the immune system, but here your immune system itself is your enemy. So it becomes very, very dicey. But yes, at this level also, there have been beautiful responses to homeopathy in cases where patients were allowed to take homeopathic treatment while they were in hospital. One thing good about this COVID-19 pandemic and the fact that Ayush spoke so much about arsenic alb is that a lot of allopathic doctors in the city here became a little more open to homeopathic treatment. So I know a couple of doctors who were able to send homeopathic medicines right into the ICU of hospitals where their patients were struggling for life. So a lot of allopathic doctors, of course, with the consent of the treating doctor, when the consent of the treating doctor was given, we were able to treat patients even in the ICU. And we saw beautiful responses to patients who were in cytokine storm also. Now, at the moderate level where there was pneumonia, the remedies that came up were bryonia, arsenic alb, arsenic iode, Drosera, Antimars, Antimtat, Phosphorus, Ferrophos, Calicarb, and Caliphos. These were really excellent remedies, I must tell you. Beautiful, beautiful results with these medicines in pneumonia cases. All right. Okay. So severe cases of COVID-19 is basically, it goes into thromboembolism, that is disseminated intravascular coagulation, cytokine storm, and finally results in acute respiratory distress syndrome. Now, what is disseminated intravascular coagulation? COVID-19 has an affinity, we all know, for ACE2 receptors. All right. Now, ACE2 receptors in the alveoli is what the COVID-19 virus has an affinity for. It has an affinity for the ACE2 alveolar receptors. That is the reason why COVID is affecting the lungs directly. Now, it also has an affinity, it has found to have an affinity for ACE2 receptors on the vascular endothelium, because of which there is vasoconstriction and thrombotic intravascular activity. Now, this results in endothelial damage. When there is endothelial damage, bleeding occurs through the mucosal macrophages, and this results in disseminated intravascular coagulation. Now, here the remedies that help are mostly the snake remedies. Lachesis and Crotalus horridis did a wonderful job here in these cases. I mentioned to you about the cytokine storm. So this is the dangerous and potentially life-threatening stage. Symptoms include fever and chills, fatigue, loss of appetite, muscle and joint pain, swelling of extremities, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, rashes, cough. All of the normal symptoms were along with that, there was rapid breathing, rapid heartbeat, low blood pressure, cardiovascular collapse or shock, acute renal failure, sepsis syndrome, seizures, headache, confusion, delirium, hallucinations, tremors, and loss of coordination. A lot of patients towards the end stage of this pandemic started coming with only confusion, sudden hallucinations, sudden tremors. We knew by then that these people were already entering cytokine storm. And at this point, I'd like to mention that when patients are in cytokine storm, their CRP drops. C-reactive proteins initially rise during the inflammation. After a certain point in time, CRP levels drop. All right. So in the collapse stage, remedies during cytokine storm were again lacusis, arsenicate, carbovelge, veratrum. Remedies mostly from the tuberculomycin, because in cytokine storm you are in the tuberculomycin, so tuberculin did a wonderful job. In the ARDS stage, we had antimars and antimtart doing beautifully. So the rubrics that were used during cytokine storm are kidneys, renal failure, chest, abscess, lungs, pulse frequent, perspiration cold, generals collapse, generals reaction lack of, respiration accelerated, heart failure, hypotension, and violent complaints, basically violency of the complaints. All right. So I would like to go into case presentation. I have 3 cases to present. These are my own cases of COVID. I'd like to share with you one of the mild cases, one of the moderate cases, and one of the ones that went into a COVID complication. All right. So case 1 was one of my easiest cases. It was in the beginning. This was a male who was age 70. He presented with dry cough and fever, ranging between 99 to 101. He had red discoloration of eyes and lacrimation on the 18th of June. He had restlessness. He was very, very, very disturbed and very upset when he was told that he would have to home quarantine. This man was very fond of his freedom. He was, in spite of the lockdown, strict lockdown rules in the city, he was out of his house every day. So he believed nothing will happen to him, and he was very happy to move out of the house. So he had tremendous anxiety for health, but somehow he had this weird thing that he cannot sit in the house. So when he was tested positive, the local authorities were coming to the homes of the people who tested positive and were strictly putting them under lockdown, and said they cannot move out of a given room which has a washroom attached to it, so that the other family members are not infected. This man was very upset. He was very restless, when very disturbed, because he was asked to be home quarantined. His family found it very difficult to contain him. And because of this restlessness symptom alone, and not because Arsenic alvis genus epidemicus, I gave him Arsenic 200 4-hourly, and Ferrum Phos 6S was given also at a 4-hourly level. This man responded very beautifully. Now, even before his test, so test results take 2 days. Okay, another way of knowing, when you're doing a COVID swab test, within 24 hours, if it is negative, you'll get your report within 24 hours. In Mumbai city, if the report took 48 hours, means you're tested positive, because the positive test had to be confirmed with 3 cycles. So a COVID swab test took 48 hours to show that it was positive. But before the man's positive test report came, he was already feeling very fine. So his symptoms began on the 18th of June, and his sample was collected on the 20th of June. And his medicine was started on 18th, follow-up on 19th, said fever was mild, it was constant at 99, but feels better, eyes were okay, dry cough, and by 20th of June, he had no fever. Sample was still given for testing, age factor was there because he was 70, so all those who are post 60, because of the age factor, everybody was tested. Cough was persistent but lesser, restlessness is better, and after that, I had given a tubovinum 1M single dose. Continued Arsenic alvis on a 6-hourly basis. By 22nd June, all the symptoms were cleared. He had weakness. I left him with 5-4-6X. By 24th June, everything cleared. This man, I took a follow-up 20 days later, and he was totally all right. He had to do an HRCT, I will tell you why later, but he was completely symptom-free by the 24th of June. All right, so this was the first case, and I mention this case because I give Arsenic alb, but I gave Arsenic alb not because it was the only remedy to give, but it was because it matched his restlessness very beautifully. All right. So case 2 is COVID diarrhea. This is one of my, I would call a little weird case, because this is the only case where I gave this remedy. Okay, coming to that. So 28-year-old male tested COVID positive on Thursday, June 4th. He had a history of fever since 4 to 5 days. And before he approached me, he was already taking Dolo twice or thrice a day with no relief. He had been frequently visiting the hospital for his mother, who was also COVID positive, and she was in ICU. She was in a very severe state. She was on 100% oxygen support. They had not taken any homeopathy for her. She was already 8 days on some allopathic medication. She got typhoid also, and along with that, her oxygen saturation started dropping, and she was admitted in hospital. Now, this boy was in and out of hospital because of his mother, and he tested positive eventually. His fever also went up to 101 maximum. He had cough since 2 days with mild breathlessness. When I spoke to him, he was not even able to breathe properly. Nausea and vomiting on attempting to expectorate, deep coughing aggravation, body ache, and mild headache. His diarrhea was something most peculiar. He had 3 to 4 stools a day, and the only PQRS symptom I got was that he had excessive hunger immediately after eating. Immediately after, sorry, not eating, immediately after stools. That was a mistake. Not after eating, but after stool. All right. So excessive hunger. He said, every time I went to the washroom, every time I had a stool, I feel extremely hungry and I'm able to eat anything under the sun. This was the only PQRS symptom I got. By the way, while I'm saying this, I'd like to mention that no matter the coronavirus is a novel disease, let's not worry as homeopaths that it is a new disease and we don't have a repertory rubric that reads COVID-19, because for the treatment of COVID-19 also, we had to just stick to our basics. What are our basics? Our basics is to form a totality of symptoms, an acute totality in some, and you just had to stick to PQRS, being able to elicit your PQRS symptoms. When you got your PQRS symptoms, my dear friends, your patient was on the road to recovery 100%. So it was very easy, not, as far as symptomatic treatment, as far as prescription was concerned, it was not such a big challenge because, my dear friends, we still stick to symptomatic totality. So, okay, coming back to this case, this patient also had sleeplessness, no taste, no appetite, with dryness of mouth and nausea, and he was in general very anxious. When I took a totality, the only remedy that came up strikingly with this symptom of excessive hunger immediately after stool was petroleum. I gave him petroleum 200 on 8 p.m. on 4th of June. On the 5th of June, 8 p.m. on 4th of June, he started. At that time, he had 101 fever. 5th of June, he reported to me in the morning saying no fever, diarrhea reduced to twice a day. Sorry, 5th of June in the evening. He had cough was 50% better, breathlessness was 80% better, and I asked him to continue it 4 hours. On the 6th of June, again, no fever, cough persistent, but less intensity, no breathlessness, no diarrhea. Then I stopped the remedy on the 8th of June. On the 10th of June, he called to say that diarrhea returned after 2 days. So I raised the potency, gave him a single dose, followed it up with tuberculinum bovinum, and since 12th June, no symptoms. And after that, the patient, after 10 days, I asked the patient to report to me. The patient was fine. There was no symptom whatsoever. All right, moving to case 3. Now, case 3, I particularly have brought into my presentation because of the complication that developed after the COVID-19. So this was a female, 23-year-old. She tested COVID positive 4 days after her dad was tested COVID positive. Now, her presenting complaints were fever 99 to 101, throat irritation that was aggravated on inhaling. Every time she took a breath, she said, I felt throat irritation. There was body ache, headache, vertigo. She was a known case of hypotension and drowsiness. She kept telling me that, doctor, my BP drops very frequently. I always have a low BP issue. And she complained of extreme drowsiness and weakness along with the upper respiratory tract symptoms. So Gelsemium had worked very well for me in the past. So I gave her Gelsemium and asked her to repeat it on a 4-hourly basis. Usually for fever, I repeat the medicine on a 4-hourly basis. If the temperature keeps rising, then I ask them to make water solution, and I ask them to repeat on an every hour basis. Now, in this case, there was no improvement after 24 hours. And then I knew that Gelsemium was definitely not her remedy. So I took a fresh totality, and after nearly 36 hours. And by then her cough had begun to get gradually worse. She began to complain of chest pain while coughing. So I knew that pneumonia had already set in. Every breath was leading to cough, she said. Each time I breathe, I am coughing. Initially, she said, each time I breathe, I have throat irritation. So her breathing was a severe aggravation. When I took the repertorial totality, Bryonia 200 came up. Bryonia came up as the first remedy. So I gave her 4-hourly repetitions of Bryonia, and she did extremely well. In 24 hours, temperature returned to normal. Cough was 50% better. SpO2 was at 96 to 98%. I asked her to continue Bryonia 6-hourly for another 2 days. The cough was nearly 90% better, and at this point, for all my patients, as I've said, I have given tuberculinum bovinum 1M single dose. Once they are 90% clear, I have given them tuberculinum bovinum. Now, what happened in this case was that nearly 20 days, not 15 days, nearly 20 days later of initial onset of symptoms, her cough returned. Now, this was something that I had not expected, and I had not seen in any of my patients until then. None of the COVID patients I treated had a relapse of any symptom whatsoever. Once they were okay, they were given tuberculinum, they were fine, and they had no complaints. But when she said her cough returned, then I was a little alarmed. SpO2 was still 98%, but I had to order a fresh chest X-ray. Now, her X-ray was not done initially when she had the symptoms of COVID, simply because if you once test positive, then you are, if you wish to be home quarantined, then you cannot get out of the house to get any procedure done. If you need an X-ray to be done, then you have to be in a quarantine center or you have to be in a hospital to get any procedure whatsoever done. So those who had blood tests to be done, we had to have pathology path technicians coming into the home along with their PPE gear to take your blood samples. But those who required an X-ray to go out were not allowed to do so unless you have an ambulance taking you in and bringing you out. And in this situation here, with the crowds that were testing positive, it was very difficult to get logistics arranged for this patient to get an X-ray done initially. Now, 20 days after the onset of symptoms, I believe that even if she had any COVID viral load left in her, it would have been very minimum and it would have not been enough to be contagious and to pass to others. That is the reason why I told her to get out and get a chest X-ray done. The X-ray, along with the X-ray, we also got her blood works done, all the same investigations that I told you about earlier. All the blood works showed no signs of acute COVID except that her ESR was high. The chest X-ray revealed scattered haziness suggestive of some active pulmonary infection. The radiologist said it could be COX or it could be viral pneumonia. Now it had to be clarified, but when I asked the patient, that is at that point, the patient revealed to me that she had already had a history of pulmonary COX, something that she had missed mentioning to me in spite of me asking for medical history. So in that case, in her case, HRCT was needed. After the HRCT was done, we found that she had an active pulmonary COX along with ground glass opacities from the viral pneumonia. So here was a case of COVID-19 plus tuberculosis, active infection of COX. So initially, this was a little, because this was the first time I had a tuberculosis aggravating after a COVID infection. So I had to obviously ask for help from pulmonologists because I was not sure if we were on the right track or not. So the pulmonologist suggested that this problem, because there was no real study, I looked up for medical papers to see if there was tuberculosis could have been brought on because of the COVID infection directly. But there was no such finding or no such confirmed study to prove that it was a cause, that COVID-19 was a cause of tuberculosis. Clearly, she had some dormant tuberculosis, maybe months or probably a few years even before this COVID set in. But the COVID has probably lowered her immunity. And because of the status of low immunity, the tuberculosis has resurfaced, has, come up, and that is why it has got into an active inflammation, active phase level. Now this patient, because it was tuberculosis, I had to move on from an acute totality to move on to give her a constitutional totality. So I found her constitutional totality to be Calcarea Phos, which even suited the tubercular miasm. So I gave her Calcarea Phos along with tuberculinum repeated, and she also got on to allopathic medication for the tuberculosis. The patient is fine. We are expecting her to have an active infection for not more than 4 weeks or 6 weeks, hopefully. And symptomatically, she's already doing better and her blood works are already getting better. That is the reason why I shared this with you, because nobody really prepared me for this. But after this case, every patient who came to me with a COVID fever, I made sure I asked them if they had any COX history. This was something that I learned through this case. So that's why I wanted to share it with you. If you have to really ask me about the learnings through this pandemic, I would say we are nearly at the end of it, at least in our city. In the city of Mumbai, we had our peaks rising at the second week and the last week, that is the third week of July. Now the number of new cases have begun to reduce. In this week, we've had lesser number of new fever cases. There are some parts of Mumbai that are still struggling, especially the northern parts of Mumbai. So it has moved gradually from the south to the suburbs, central and western suburbs, and then slowly to the north of Mumbai. So gradually, the number of cases are also reducing in phases. So the northern parts of Mumbai are still struggling with very high levels of fever cases, but the place where I'm living, the number of cases have already begun to decline, which is quite a relief. as far as the load in the clinic is concerned, but yes, precautions and preventive measures have to still be employed. Now, one of the things that I learned is that it is very, very important to keep up to date as to what is happening around you. As a private practitioner, as a private clinician, you tend to get absorbed in your own patient zone, and you're so tied up with treating your own patients, and it's sometimes difficult to keep in touch. Even at regular times, difficult to keep in touch with the new advances in medicine. But in this case, it became very, very vital because treatment protocols were changing every 2 days. Testing protocols were changing every 2 days. The medicines that they were being given by the allopaths were changing every 2 days. So it became very, very important for us to keep in touch with what is happening. If I had not looked up for medical papers, then I wouldn't even know about anosmia and loss of taste. It was only when I kept in touch and tried to keep finding out about what is happening that I was aware. Secondly, I would suggest, it is very at the last point that I have put there, work with other homeopaths, form a virtual team, take help, because there is no scope for mistakes. Now, we had a quick response team that was formed in Mumbai, along with the other homeopathic doctors who are also treating COVID-19 cases. So we had Dr. Ajit Kulkarni, Dr. Praful Barwalia, a lot of big names in homeopathy. All the senior doctors were part of this quick response team. And by being part of this team, we were able to share our cases. We were able to learn from other doctors, and sharing of information became very vital. What I'm trying to say is that you cannot work on an isolated level as a homeopath in a COVID-19 pandemic. Not just homeopath, but for that matter, every doctor cannot be working in isolation. It was something that you needed to work with other doctors as a team. And when you make a team, you are probably able to share much more information, have a lot more learnings, and have more efficacy in your treatment. So keeping up to date, very important. Lab investigations is another thing which I find a lot of homeopaths take a little bit lightly. That is something that we need to understand, that is very important. So a lot of these patients were sometimes not even able to give me symptoms directly, because a lot of people came to me with COVID cases who were, their relatives or their friends, or who were in quarantine centers, who were already in isolation wards. So I couldn't really get in touch in some patients. All I had with me was lab investigations. And really speaking, the lab investigations became of utmost importance in this COVID-19 situation, because that was the only way to determine and to understand the prognosis of your case. Because a patient may become asymptomatic. Sometimes his oxygen saturations also may be good, but his serum ferritin is suddenly very high, or he's already having D-dimer or interleukin-6 into play. LDH levels are raised, and then you are already knowing that the patient's going to enter into cytokine storm before you know it. Most of the death cases in COVID has happened because of a delay in identifying oxygen saturation drops. In every case where oxygen saturation drop was identified and caught at the right time and treated at the right time, then those people survived. The ones who missed catching oxygen saturation on time were the ones who actually couldn't survive. So mortality rate was high because the oxygen saturation was not caught on time. That is why SpO2 was sometimes the only indicator of progress. And here, as I told you earlier, I struggled to get patients to agree to buy a pulse oximeter. Sadly, our local chemists just skyrocketed the prices of oximeters, because I don't know, in a situation like this, when prices should have dropped or people should have made oximeters more easily available, the prices went up. So your oximeters were being priced at 3,000 rupees. So people just refused to buy them. So I managed to get some oximeters at a lower price and started distributing them to some patients, simply because we needed to know oxygen saturation. So it was difficult to get people to agree, first of all, to have oxygen saturation maintained at home. So with that note, I'd like to say we do not have scope for mistakes. Homeopathy has fantastic scope in the system. You can even, so I think someone asked if there was anything if I've treated anyone in the cytokine storm. So patients in cytokine storm were not advised to treat individually, But as a team, yes, I have been part of a team of doctors which have treated cytokine storm and patients in ICU, patients already in acute respiratory distress syndrome, and we have found fantastic results. So I wouldn't want to share those cases here because they were not my individual cases. We worked as a team there. So I believe that those cases would be able to share on a better, by a different set of people maybe. All right, so yes, so with investigations, we were able to understand how much of progress the patient made. On that note, I would like to thank each one of you for patiently listening to me, for giving me an opportunity to share my experiences, although very, very small. I believe in this whole maze in the city of Mumbai, but thank you very much for having me, and I enjoyed myself.
Yes, Dr. Anjalika,
Yes,
it was a very fruitful presentation as such. We have not experienced this type of bold presentation. I mean, we are indeed proud to have you as our student who has done such a nice job in this pandemic at Mumbai. There are a few questions for you by the audience, I mean the participants. You had told the constitutional remedy is the best medicine for prevention, isn't it? So somebody wants to know the repetition of the constitution remedy.
So in most cases, I gave high potency single dose, no repetition.
No repetition. That was indeed wonderful, sticking on to the classical homeopathy, whatever the genus epidemicus with the constitutional remedy.
Yes.
Then how far is the false positive and false negative results to be taken into?
So really speaking, in this case where there are false positive and false negative results, we had to go by the lab investigations. So whether a case was tested positive or tested negative, if the ferritin level was high, we knew that the patient was COVID positive. If the CRP levels were high, we knew that this is chances of COVID positive. If the neutrophil count was high, then we knew that there are chances of this being COVID positive. So just by the swab test, it was very difficult to judge because there were plenty of false negative and false positive results. So the only way to determine prognosis of the case or exactly where the patient stands was with the other lab investigations.
So you do the other lab investigations along with this COVID test also?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, then that's the good thing.
Yes.
So does the presentation of the patient vary from place to place?
Yes, I believe so. The amount of differences in so many places we have already seen, not only within the city of Mumbai. I believe that if you have cases in Mangalore and Bangalore, I'm sure the presentations will start changing. Not only that, right from April to June, that is in the last 3-4 months, I have seen a change in the presentation of cases gradually. Initially, anxiety levels were really high. So that also became a key factor in determining your remedy. Over a period of time, people got used to COVID. So that stigma was getting easier by the day, and people were no longer scared about testing positive. So the fear factor and anxiety factor started reducing, so when you bring in your totality, you bring in your mind symptoms also. So there was a change in the presentation of the mind symptoms. Even physical symptoms initially was only upper respiratory tract. Slowly there was GI symptoms involved, and then from there it moved on to only weakness and only anosmia, loss of taste. So there also there was a change in the presentation. So I believe that even from one city to another, there will definitely be a change in present. That is the reason why you need to keep up to date to see what are the changes in the presenting symptoms of the patients.
Okay. What is your opinion on herd immunity? Herd immunity.
Yes, a lot of people
discussing upon that nowadays. Yeah.
Yes, a lot of people believe that herd immunity is the only way, we will get rid of this virus. In fact, some virologists say that viruses normally return in the winters. So a lot of people are expecting a second wave all over the world in the months of October, November, December. I'm not very sure about commenting on that because I'm not a virologist or a viral expert. But I believe that a huge population is going to get infected before a vaccine is found. And I don't see any reason why we should be scared to get infected. because if you are working on your lifestyle and your immune system already getting on a high level, then if you get, in fact, it is better, because once you get it, then you at least have antibodies for the next 3 months, so you become immune to the COVID for a fresh infection. So in fact, I have been telling people it's all right if you get it. So herd immunity is something that is actually good, because then you're already a safer population.
In fact, what was your precautionary measures taken when you were treating COVID patients?
Yes, so I was using the gear when I had fever cases coming to me directly. I had to stay away from my children for a bit, isolate myself sometimes. I gave my family also tuberculinum and made sure they took their constitutional medicines, and made sure I was taking some tuberculinum. Beyond that, I believe that God was in control, and that is why I managed to steer clear.
Okay. So what is the protocol bid in Mumbai regarding the prophylaxis?
Yes,
presently?
in Mumbai, the local health authorities have very generously provided the arsenic alb 30 or 200 potency to almost the whole of the population. So people have also very eagerly taken the medicine. Those who never believed in homeopathy also came running to take this medicine, because people were so scared at the beginning. The police personnel of the whole city of Mumbai have taken arsenic alb and camphor, because some doctors said that camphor was a good prophylaxis. But in Mumbai, at least, the prophylaxis with homeopathy was given a good response. Unfortunately, as I said, there was no documentation done, so we really do not know what the effect has been and how many people took and got or didn't take and got whatever.
Okay. There is one question coming up now.
Yeah.
Present with complaints, then is there any necessity to give acute remedy to give relief prior and afterwards the constitutional remedy should be given?
So
If the patient presents with the complaints, do you need any acute remedy?
Yes, if there are presenting symptoms, if the patient has symptoms of upper respiratory tract, especially even if it is mild symptoms, a symptomatic totality of current, that is acute totality, is important.
Okay, okay. So any experience with the elevated levels of ferritin or D-dimer?
Yes, I have had experiences, but they were not my own personal cases. We worked as a team. So there were a couple of other doctors involved, and we together helped in choosing a remedy and providing. So they were not my own personal patients. So my personal cases, I have had all of them treated at home, treated and recovered at home.
Yeah.
So the ones with, yes, the ones who I've treated at home, I have seen beautiful improvements in serum ferritin levels dropping. But the ones who were at the level of D-dimer rising, that means there was already thromboembolism about to happen, those were the ones who were already in hospital. So those patients we treated as a team, as I said. So I did not have any of my personal patients getting admitted at that level in the ICU where these levels went high. So privately I did, but along with the team I did, yes. That is where these remedies like lachesis and carbo-veg, etc., have done wonderfully.
Okay. What about the potency of zincum met and zincum phos which you used 200. In anosmia? 200.
200 single dose.
Single dose. And that was found to be effective?
Very effective.
Okay. So I think we have concluded with the questions, what has come up. Okay. Many have appreciated you, Dr.
Yes.
Angelica. We also take that in partially as a teacher. Yes. Awesome presentation. And yeah. So I was overwhelmed to hear the in-depth, the pathology behind. You have in-depth gone into the pathology, and your treatment was based on that. And you have given such an importance to the lab investigation and not the prior lab investigations. Yes. As the patient progresses, you have emphasized on the changes what happens in the lab investigation, isn't it? That was indeed a new idea what we have got. Okay, so even I was happy that you are sticking on to the classical homeopathy.
Yes.
Right from the prevention, you stick on to the constitutional remedy and the importance of PQRS and totality in treatment of the patient, isn't it? So that was indeed.
I believe that the more basic and the more sticking to classical homeopathy, the better the results. The moment you start getting trying to be fancy and try different stunts, then you get confused. But the basics are what you need in treating, and most effective treatment is found through basics.
Yeah. So thank you, Angelica, for that beautiful presentation. You have beautifully picturized the various features of COVID-19 in various stages, I can tell you. Not a single presentation, the various stages, right from the mental anxiety to the happy hypoxia, what you mentioned, all that with anosmia, tastelessness, all these are different pictures with the patient presented. And you have beautifully described it. Okay, so it was really an awesome presentation, and
Thank you so much, ma'am.
bold enough to do such a great job. It is an honor, isn't it?
Yes,
Even
absolutely.
for the human race, you have done such a wonderful job, and we wish you that you continue the good work what you're doing now.
Thank you,
With
ma'am.
all our blessings.
With
okay?
all your blessings, yes.
we are indeed proud of you.
Thank you.
The
Thank you.
whole college, the institution salutes you on this behalf.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Yes.
Since the first reports of the cases of COVID-19 from the city of Wuhan in China, understanding of this disease is evolving. The report says that the traditional Chinese medicine was found effective in its treatment. Likewise, every system of medicine has to collectively make an effort to control this pandemic and save the human race. As a homeopath, it is our duty to do the best we can, either preventing the spread or curing the sick. So once more, thank you very much, Dr. Angelica, for sharing your experience in treating the pandemic. It was indeed a fruitful session, throwing a ray of hope among the participants in treating such cases. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Over to you, Dr. Hafiz, for concluding.
On behalf of the organizing team, Provision 2020, I express my gratitude and respect for our distinguished speaker, Dr. Angelica D'Souza, for sparing her invaluable time for us and enlightening us on COVID-19 management. Thank you, ma'am. I would also like to thank the moderator of the session, Dr. Sheena Salin. I would like to thank the administrator, Reverend Father Roshan Krasta, Principal Dr. Shivprasad K, and Vice Principal Dr. ESJ Prabhukiran for their valuable support for Provision 2020. I express my gratitude to the webinar organizing team headed by Dr. Dheeraj Fernandez, who have been working hard to make this webinar series a successful one. Finally, I thank all the delegates who have dedicated their time in being a part of this session actively. Now, tomorrow, we have a session by Dr. Vinaya Uttaman on management of acutes. Thank you and good night.